Hello everyone and welcome to Take on Tech. Take on Tech is a program that comes to you from KBC Channel 1 every Thursday from 7:30 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. This program endeavors to delve into technological trends with a view of demystifying information, communication, and technologies. In addition, the program aims at informing and educating the viewer on the basics of technology and allows for interaction with a panel of experts. Today, we are going to be discussing cybersecurity, trends, and emerging threats. And before I introduce you to the panel of experts, I take you over to Jane Wambui to give us our social media handles.
Thank you, Grace. Good evening and welcome once again to Take on Tech. My name is Jane Wambui. As always, we are glad you are with us this evening. Now, as aforementioned, tonight we're going to be looking at emerging trends and threats in the cybersecurity space and just trying to see how we can best respond to them, given that October has been the International Cybersecurity Awareness Month. So what have we learned throughout this month, and what do we need to do to just ensure that our cyberspace is safe, even as different issues continue to emerge day in, day out? Well, we'd love for you to be part of this discussion, and you can always talk to us and share with us your views, comments, or questions, or clarifications that you may be needing in regards to this discussion. And you can do so via our various communication platforms on Facebook. Our official page is KBC Channel 1 TV. You can also get onto Twitter. The official hashtag is TakeOnTech, and you can tag us individually as well. My handle is Jane Wambui. My colleague, you can find her as Jige Thaiga, that is on Twitter, and our official station handle ever remains at KBC Television. SMS number is also up and running. 20154 is the number, and the name and location would be absolutely appreciated as you send your messages. But for now, let's just get started with this discussion. Back to you, Grace.
Thank you, Jane. Cybersecurity trends and emerging threats. Cybersecurity threatens critical infrastructure. It increases costs of operation. It inconveniences and is a creator of loss. Like Jane has said, October is the month that we celebrate cybersecurity awareness. In the beginning of the month, there was a celebration of global stakeholders at the Africa Union who converged to discuss what the problems are and what are the challenges and how that will be dealt with. At local level, the regulator, that is the Communications Authority, celebrated the National Cybersecurity Week. That is last week. And today, the Kenya ICT Action Network also had a meeting of non-state actors to also discuss the emerging challenges. In our panel today, I would like to introduce Ms. Daniela Shnidring, right?
Yes. Right.
Daniela sits on the board of Global Forum on Cybersecurity. Welcome, Daniela.
Thank you.
Our next panelist is Victor Kapiyo. Victor Kapiyo is the Kenya ICT lead on cybersecurity and is a lawyer. And then we have Ms. Mercy Wanjau, who is the Acting Director General of Communications Authority. Karibuni.
Thank you.
So I'll just go straight into the questions and start with you, Mercy. What is the state of play in Kenya as regards cybersecurity?
Thank you very much, Grace. And we are very delighted to come and join you here as we close off on the Global Cybersecurity Month. If I was to summarize the state of cybersecurity in Kenya, I would say these are very, very interesting times, because you find that Kenya has had some leapfrog experiences in terms of infrastructure and adoption of the ICT platform. As a result, there is a growing dependence on that platform, from education, financial services, e-commerce, and because of that high uptake in private sector and also government with e-government services, we are now paying our taxes online. The registry, the lands registry is online. There is the Huduma number and all these kind of things that are really going online. You find that there's a growing interest and dependence on that platform, as a result of which there's also other unintended experiences that then follow the value-added experience, so that as people continue to exploit the value from the platform, the cyber criminals are also following closely behind to exploit vulnerabilities, and ignorance on that platform now becomes a very dangerous thing. And it therefore becomes very important for anybody that uses this platform to really be aware on what the experience is, what the expectations are, and how to manage themselves.
Thank you, Mercy. Victor, as an non-state actor in this field, what are some of the key concerns or emerging threats from a non-state actor perspective?
Thank you very much, Grace, for that question and for hosting us in this show today. I think, as Mercy has rightly mentioned, we have quite a huge number of people who are now using online services, and the biggest risk now is, social engineering attacks, where, for example, people, it's sort of like how fraud works. People use online systems to extract or, derive benefits from people and illegally extort them from money. We also have, things like ransomware and malware, which is basically software which is designed to compromise systems and get benefit out of people illegally and, frustrate them to make them now pay money so that they can get their systems back online. The other challenges are identity theft, for example, where, we've seen this campaign on PIN codes and people keeping their PIN code safe, and that has affected many people. Over and above, things like M-Pesa fraud through mobile phones that, affect many people. But also, there are other challenges that exist within the ecosystem in terms of capacity to respond, to detect these attacks. Many institutions don't know when they are attacked and only find out much, much, much later once their systems have been compromised. And I think there's a challenge there in terms of anticipating attacks, detecting, and also managing. So those are critical things that we are concerned with. And I think just lastly to mention that the policy and legal framework also is an area that needs attention. As the attacks increase, our laws and policies have not been updated to respond to these emerging threats. So that is something that we hope that attention needs to be paid to.
Thank you, Victor. Daniela,
Yes.
tell us, why is October recognized globally as the Cybersecurity Awareness Month?
Yes, so Cybersecurity Month came about as this collaborative effort, a concerted effort by different actors, so government, private sector, civil society, academia, many years ago, to bring about awareness raising on these issues. So up until really not long ago, there was this conception that cybersecurity is an issue, just for governments, or it's like this very difficult technical thing, for tech people. And that's something that we are thankfully moving on from now. And we understand that, yes, it may be that government has a lead on developing policies and laws to tackle these threats, but actually there's not one single agency that can tackle all of these threats and that can address cybersecurity alone. So we're now moving on to this belief that actually cybersecurity is a collaborative effort where stakeholders and different actors need to be aware of these issues. And someone told me once that cybersecurity is sort of like this door or this fence that you have, and you can have the best fence out there, and the best tech and all, like the latest equipment. But if the person that's operating the door or the fence does not really know how to do it, then, it's not really going to work. So I think that's really bringing it back, to the needs and to the reality of every day that people, end users, at home, they use technology and they are, they're important actors in this, and they need to be aware and learn how to protect themselves.
Thank you so much, Daniela. I come back to you, Mercy. Victor has pointed out that, there are issues of legal frameworks. Yes. And I'm just wondering, what has the regulator put in, or has the regulator put in any measures to tackle emerging cybersecurity concerns?
Yes, indeed the regulator has put in a lot of effort, but let me backtrack a little bit and touch on what Daniela spoke about, the collaborative effort. We do recognize that tackling cybersecurity is a multi-stakeholder effort. So we collaborate very heavily, starting off with the policy maker and then coming down to the regulator. There are the many users and the many actors, as she has mentioned. So a couple of years ago, we came to that realization and we decided to start a dialogue that would look at the frameworks as we have them now, and we would then query and say, we have these frameworks, are they representative of the kind of safeguards that we are seeking for the online space? And of course, the conclusion was not quite. We still need to step up. So we did a stakeholder mapping and we identified the range of stakeholders that we felt needed to be in this conversation to be able to drive it towards relevance, responsiveness, and agility. And arising out of that about 2-year exercise of negotiations and discussions, the Computer Misuse and Cybercrime Act came to pass last year. But you know what is so interesting about this space, Grace, is that no sooner do you pass a law, then you realize that that law is actually missing and a bit outdated in a few things. So we were very proud, certainly, that we were able to bring up our legislative framework in keeping with some of the global standards that are recognized in the Budapest Convention and the Africa Union Convention. However, that is not the end. There are things that have emerged since then that we realize we need to incorporate. So this keeps us in a situation where we always have to remain in the collaborative space, speaking to the different actors, because we do recognize that the different actors will speak to this issue from different angles, which is all very important in order that we do come out with something that is all inclusive and representative. So we carry on very much on the continuous and responsive development of that space, but we do recognize that having good policy and regulatory frameworks is not an end in itself. We need the user, the consumer, to be able to interact with that space, to be able to interact with the frameworks in a useful manner. So we continue to engage in a lot of initiatives that expose the law, expose issues of cyber hygiene, so that the user is empowered, is knowledgeable, is aware, and can be able to collaborate with other users, especially in the office space or the group space, like in schools and the like, to ensure that they're able to drive towards safe standards.
All right. I am told we have a commercial break, but we're coming shortly after that. I think, Mercy, when you talk about mapping stakeholders,
Yes.
Who are some of these stakeholders that you identified?
Okay. In part of our stakeholder mapping, we identified 2 broad groups to start with. There is what you would call the organized groups or the corporates. So that's the bigger number of groups, where, for example, government departments would fall in there, schools would fall in there, because those are clusters that you recognize. Then there's the ones that are more single, like the user, the individual. And of course, as we say here, the center of that whole conversation is Wanjiko, because the reason why we come out every day to develop this infrastructure, to provide these platforms, is that Wanjiko is able to transact with her government representative, with the government processes, to do her business, to be able to also conduct her own commerce and affairs in a way that recognizes her as an individual, gives her space. She's able to express herself and to extract value out of it. So when you bring that up to the bigger platform, for example, at the school levels, that now becomes more inclusive, because it now brings the Wanjiko and her children and the family in the broader perspective. Going to financial services is the same way. So we did quite a comprehensive stakeholder mapping, which of course introduces very many players, and largely that narrative is driven by who is interested in this conversation, what is their level of interest, what angle are they looking at this from? And I really must commend the non-state actors, because they are driven by certain thematic areas, they do bring in a very granular conversation that is driven on various other factors, which have helped to really inform some of the guidelines and the policies and practices that we would put in place. So this is an area where I would say that much as we have done the stakeholder analysis, I expect that this would be a very dynamic process, that we continue to identify other stakeholders who may have evolved and who may want to drive that conversation from yet another angle that had not been foreseen earlier, so that we ensure that we remain agile. Because in a fast-growing area like this, that character value of agility becomes more important now than ever before. Yeah.
Okay, we are talking to Mercy Wanjau, Victor Kapiyo, and Daniela Shnidring. And this is Take on Tech. We take a break and we'll be back soon. You're watching Take on Tech. If you have just joined us, today we are discussing cybersecurity, threats and emerging trends and emerging threats. And we are talking to Mercy Wanjau, to Victor Kapiyo, and to Daniela Shnidring. Jane, can you tell us what's happening on social media?
Yes, of course. The hashtag still remains Take on Tech on Twitter. Our official station handle is ever at KBC Television, and our individual handles at GK Thaiga, and my handle is at Boy across all social media platforms. And let me just start from the tweets that we received the earliest. Remember, still just asking your thoughts in regards to the Cybersecurity Awareness Month and what you make of this emerging trends and threats. And let's start with Josie here, who says, cybersecurity is our shared responsibility. Everyone is a part of the corporate human firewall and must practice good cyber hygiene every day. We move on to Morris, who says, Cybersecurity Awareness Month might end today, but that doesn't mean that you should stop owning, securing, and protecting IT. Cybersecurity is everyone's responsibility, and by taking certain precautions, we can create an internet that is safe for all users. All right, let's get some more tweets. I can see guys are absolutely enjoying the show from KICTANet, and the communications handle as well is very active. Yes, here we have Makeda saying, as cybersecurity threats continue to evolve, so too must organizations and their security programs. Evolving and adapting to such threats is much easier when you have a complete picture of the IT landscape, which calls for more awareness. All right. Let's get one last tweet from George here, who says, as Cybersecurity Awareness Month draws to a close, what are some of the common cybersecurity errors we all need to correct as individuals in order to keep sensitive data protected both inside and outside of our workplaces? The hashtag still remains Take on Tech. Back to you, Grace.
Welcome back. Cybersecurity, emerging trends and threats. Victor, earlier on you talked about, first we want to thank our online participants. Thank you so much, Jose, on that comment about cybersecurity being our shared responsibility and the need to have cyber hygiene. I think Mercy talked about it, and we'll be coming back to her to explain what cyber hygiene is. Earlier on, Victor, you did talk about lack of capacity to detect cybersecurity issues. And I am just wondering, whose responsibility is it to guarantee cybersecurity?
Yes, thank you, Grace. Like, the last comment, cybersecurity is everyone's responsibility, and we all need to take steps and take precautions based on our respective roles. So, for example, if when it comes to, the regulator, for example, needs to ensure that the ecosystem is secure for everyone. Service providers such as ISPs need to ensure that their networks are safe for use and, they are secure and attacks are not being perpetrated through their systems. If you're an organization that has, online services, then you need to take precautions to ensure that your internal systems, your people are capable of defending the system against attacks. And, whether it's academia, protect schools and children to ensure that the networks that they're using, the devices that they're using are safe and secure. Government, for example, also needs to ensure that, in terms of laws and policies, they're able to facilitate through budgets, for example, for all relevant institutions to ensure that they have the capacity to detect these offenses when they occur, and they're able to respond to the attacks whenever they are there. But also for the individual user, what we are calling cyber hygiene, that you as an owner of a device, what measures have you taken to ensure that you protect yourself? And like the analogy that Daniela had spoken about a fence and a home, if we look at our own physical security in our houses, at night you lock your doors and you shut your windows, and others have a fence and they have a big padlock at the front. It's the same way that we need to secure our devices and our systems, that there needs to be a padlock at the door. We need not to allow strangers into our households. And even when they knock, you have the option of saying no. And I think that ability of the public to safeguard themselves first, because the police and the regulators and every other person will only come, you'll only go to report once you've been attacked, but there are some things that you can do by yourself that can help ensure that you're safe and secure.
Okay. Daniela, sitting at that global level as an advisory board member of the Global Conference on Cybersecurity Expertise, what coordinated measures are countries taking to address cybersecurity in a holistic manner?
Yes, thanks, Grace. So as we were saying, so there's not one single stakeholder or actor that can tackle all the threats, and that's the case as well for countries. So I think there's a more general agreement now that there is a need for international collaboration and cooperation. So these conversations are taking place at the global level, and for example at the UN, at the United Nations, and there are many things that states don't agree on, but there's one thing where pretty much everyone agrees, is that there is a need for capacity building on cybersecurity, and there's a need for capacity building at all levels. And there's also a need to not reinvent the wheel. So there are things that have already been done. There are, awareness campaigns that have been created that, can be then used again, or materials, that can be replicated or shared and used in different contexts. So that's where maybe a space like the Global Forum on Cyber Expertise, the GFCE, comes, very useful, because it's somewhere where people can share these resources, and, something that that somebody else created might be very helpful for you. And I think that the need for those spaces is becoming more apparent, and the value for that information sharing is really become crucial.
Thanks, Daniela. Victor, what are some of these things that need to be done by various stakeholders? Like Mercy outlined and said they did a stakeholder mapping. And I'm just wondering, what are things that need to be done by various stakeholders to deal with cybersecurity?
Well, thank you, Grace. I'd like to talk about KICTAnet's policy brief that was just launched today. And in this brief, we are basically looking at the state of cybersecurity in Kenya. And in the brief, we make several recommendations, which we are calling the 6 Ps. And in terms of what needs to be done, the first is prioritizing cybersecurity, and this includes a call to all stakeholders to prioritize cybersecurity as an issue of importance that needs attention. The second P is, policies and legislation, that we need to ensure that we have proper frameworks, proper policies, not just at the national level, but also within organizations, to ensure that we are taking steps to safeguard our own cybersecurity. The third P is basically political will. We take note that it is not enough to have policies, but there must be will to implement those policies. And we are saying that policy Political will needs to start from the top and at all levels in all organizations, whether they are boards, whether it's government, all relevant organizations and institutions need to marshal the correct political will to effect the change that is required. The other P is partnerships, which Daniela and Mercy have also spoken about, that we need collaboration and partnerships of all stakeholders in their respective roles so that the processes to safeguard the systems include everybody. Because one of the things we must appreciate is that if I use a phone, I'm using a certain network, whether it is Safaricom or whether it is Zuku. That network is controlled by somebody else who is not me. Not the police. So how can we bring all these stakeholders together to partner together to ensure that there's, safety and security of the systems? And I think another P is the public, putting people at the center of cybersecurity initiatives. We need to make sure that all individuals are aware about cybersecurity and what they need to do in their own small capacities. Protect Wanjiko if we are the regulators, if we are the government, to ensure that our laws, our policies and practices safeguard the interests of the Mwananchi, because at the end of the day, they're the ones who suffer the biggest losses. Thank you.
Okay, Mercy, the regulator has actually been known for a long time in the ICT industry to hold stakeholder engagement. And this was way before our constitution gave us Article 10, in which stakeholders need to be involved. So I'm wondering, how can stakeholders' engagement be enhanced where cybersecurity is concerned? Because you seem like you are the body that does this.
Yes, indeed. Thank you, Grace. I think the stakeholder consultation is actually a platform that has yielded very, very good results over time. And you do remember you were involved in the early years when we started off this process. And as a result of which, we ended up drawing out voices and comments and considerations that ordinarily would not have come to the floor. This was very helpful because it helped us to enrich the outputs that finally came out. But recognizing the complexities of cybersecurity, as some of my colleagues have said, that it is seen as something for techies, that's something that is so removed there, we did recognize with time that this conversation, its DNA also can isolate because it sounds too high-tech. And we began to slowly get down to the space of breaking it down 101 into a story that anyone can understand. One of the ways we did it was through our initiative, the Child Online Protection Initiative, which actually produced a brochure which broke down that whole cyber security space for children, for teachers, parents and guardians, so that even a child at their level knows what some of the measures they need to take to ensure that they get onto the online space in a safe way are. This is a skill and a competence that we are developing because we would like to demystify the ICT space to the point that it really becomes part of the day-to-day conversation, and it is not an isolating conversation. So we continue with the stakeholder evaluation and to extract feedback on how best can we engage our various stakeholders in order to elicit value to drive our processes forward.
Okay. Daniela, what globally, what would you say are some of the common interests and priorities among the different countries?
So I think I would go back to capacity building and awareness raising. I think that's something that pretty much every country needs to different levels and different degrees, and I think there's a real interest in, as my colleagues were saying, to approach this in a really holistic way and to approach it in a way as well that's sustainable. So it's not, just a one-time thing. It's not just one event or, one training that you do, or, you change your password once, to a strong password. It's something that you need to continually, evolve and update. So yeah, I would say approaching, these issues from a really holistic and sustainable way is pretty much a priority for countries.
Victor, are there priorities from the non-state actors?
Yes, I think, like Daniela has said, we must recognize that awareness is still low, and therefore it needs to be prioritized. I think the other thing is also building the capacity of the various institutions and resourcing them appropriately to enable them detect, anticipate, and manage cyber risks as and when they occur. Because one of the things we have noted in our study is that the cost of cybercrime in 2018 was $260 million US. That is just 1 year, and it is growing. So we need to be able to put in place mechanisms to detect these attacks, to anticipate them, so that we are better prepared, because preparation is key, and you cannot come to be doing first aid. We must be able to preempt these attacks before they occur and address them effectively, and put in place also a proper policy and legal framework. A cybersecurity strategy for the country would be useful. A standalone cybersecurity policy would also be useful to enable that collaboration and coordination of all stakeholders in a unified direction, or other than just having scattered policies that nobody is taking the lead on. And I think in terms of, finally, leadership, it is very important for the government, as the protector of everyone, to take leadership and even to appoint a focal point, as if it could be the communication authority, to spearhead cybersecurity initiatives in the country, which would provide a very good direction. Thank you.
You mentioned about $260 US million lost. How was this figure arrived at?
Well, these are estimates based on a study that was conducted by Seriano, which is a company which conducts studies on cybersecurity, and they are based on their own findings in terms of what are declared by different institutions, for example, banks, insurance companies, and the public, in terms of what they have lost from attacks in terms of value. So that is how they arrived at the figure.
Okay. Mercy, are there national cybersecurity priorities that the regulator is working on to ensure that this country achieves its Vision 2030 goal of becoming a regional ICT hub? And I'm asking that because there have been discussions about, we could just be crippled if our systems were attacked. So it would, even terrorism would be nothing compared to our systems being attacked.
Okay, that's a very important question, because Kenya recently dedicated its digital economy blueprint for Africa for connectivity, and that was a real positive signal on a political endorsement for the role that ICTs can play to pivot Kenya towards a middle-income state. So in that regard, we then take a very serious look at the policy and regulatory framework, because it is the anchor. It is the anchor of safeguarding for our economy and for our people going forward. And as has been said, even with the policy and the frameworks in place, if the people are not engaged, then there is a gap. So we continue to collaborate very heavily with the various partners to deepen awareness and capacity building at the individual level and at the corporate level. We also do get involved in quite a number of initiatives. I said, like the child online protection, we have the fireside chats. Recently we had the cybersecurity conference, we had the hackathon, and we continue to deepen our partnerships to drive for value, because there must be a link, a sustainable link, a link that drives value from the frameworks to the practices. and the hygiene that is practiced with regard to how we interact with our systems and processes. So this is something that I would like to really even mention here, that we are very interested in identifying partnerships, evaluating them, and seeing what are the levels of mutuality that we can be able to strike, because indeed this is not a one-person conversation. This is a conversation that will bring many of us on the table.
Okay. You keep talking about cyber hygiene. To the ordinary viewer who is watching there and who is not conversant with cyber issues, what is cyber hygiene?
Okay. Cyber hygiene, simply put, is how do I interact with my device as I work day to day? Is it password protected? How often do I refresh that password? How do I secure my password? Is it posted somewhere on the wall that everyone can see? When somebody is doing financial transactions, for example, is it the right thing to go and access your bank account inside a Wi-Fi that is unsecured? Perhaps I need to wait to go to a secure platform to do that kind of a transaction. Coming down to the minors, the children, the users, do they know that when you go online and somebody approaches you online, what should you say? What should you not? When does that child recognize that it is no longer a safe space and they need to introduce an adult into that conversation, because this is not the utility that was expected on this platform? So that more and more we are realizing, the same way that we all learned certain standard ways of conducting ourselves in the presence of others, we perhaps need to begin to learn again and to keep refreshing how we interact with these new ICTs.
Very interesting about passwords, because they say a lot of women use their children's names as the passwords, and so if you know somebody and the name of their child, it's very likely to get into their emails.
Right.
So people need to change that.
Right.
Victor, social engineering and identity theft. Please make a comment on that, because you talked about it.
Yes. So social engineering basically is a way in which people who don't have good intentions manipulate others to derive a certain benefit. So simply explained with an example, for example, when you receive a message telling you that you have won 100,000 shillings in a contest which you did not participate in, and they are telling you that in order to claim your 100,000, you need to send 5,000 shillings to a certain number so that you can claim your 100,000. So you can see that there is a fraud element, because as soon as you send that 5,000 shillings, that number that you send the money to goes off. You lose your money. If it had been sent through, for example, M-Pesa, they have withdrawn it. They have thrown away the SIM card, and you can never, it becomes very difficult to trace them. So these are offenses which people use to defraud others, or what we can say unsuspecting members of the public. It also happens in business, where people pretend that they are selling certain products. Someone can be selling you a motor vehicle, but that motor vehicle does not exist. As soon as you pay the deposit, that person goes offline. So you can see that they're manipulating through, because Kenyans trust. We trust sometimes too much. And because we trust, then we are vulnerable, and we trust the system, so we're able to lose money. When it comes to identity theft, these are related to offenses which people steal somebody's identity. So for example, if you had left your ATM card somewhere, and there are people who keep their ATM card and the PIN of the ATM card in the same location. So somebody can get the ATM card and your PIN code, and they go and transact as if they are you know? So they go and present themselves online, because the computer does not know your identity. The computer only knows numbers. And as soon as somebody enters your PIN, then they're able to send money from your account if you transact online, or from your M-Pesa account. So we can see sometimes people steal SIM cards. They go and re-register as you, with an ID number, and they're able to withdraw money from your M-Pesa, for example, or from your bank account. So that is how people lose. Other people can steal someone's identity to use it to defraud them. Okay,
Daniela, closing remarks, and maybe I would want you to comment on what one tweet said about the need for organizations needing to revolve as cybersecurity challenges emerge.
So I think you can never be completely secure. So that's just the reality, and something that we need to understand. But we need to make our most to get there. And I think in particular, with organizations that maybe, work with human rights defenders and, people whose information, can be quite sensitive and could even put them at danger, I would say, that's even more important to make the effort. So I would definitely call for that.
Okay. You have been watching Take on Tech, a TV program that comes to you every Thursday from 7:30 to 8:30. And today we've been looking at cybersecurity trends and emerging threats. In the studio, we had Ms. Mercy Wanjau from the Acting Director General of the Communications Authority. We had Victor Kapiyo, who is cybersecurity lead and a lawyer at KICTANet. And we had Daniela Shnidring from the Global Forum on Cybersecurity. Thank you very much for joining us and for giving your views. My name is Grace Githaiga, and I take you over to Jane Wamboi to close the show for us.
All right, just two final tweets. We have a Conrad here who's saying the majority of cyber attacks are the result of human error. And since October is the Cybersecurity Awareness Month, therefore, let us all understand that some common cyber threats are, let us understand some of these common cyber threats in order to stay ahead of criminals. And just in relation to Daniela's last comment saying you can never really be secure, Zach says, unlike high-waisted pants, old software never comes back into style. So you have to keep it up to date for your own safety, especially during the Cybersecurity Awareness Month. Now that brings us to a close of Take on Tech. We absolutely appreciate that you made time to be with us this evening. Do remember to join us again next week right here on KBC Channel 1 for another fantastic edition of Take on Tech. My name is Jane Wamboi. Do have a lovely evening. God bless.